Hello, wonderful dreamers, and welcome back to another magical story at Fantasy Gleam. So far, we've celebrated a New Year's party, listened to the rhyming years, and even stood with the brave clothespins against the naughty wind. Tonight, we journey under the sea to meet a very unusual and very selfish creature, the oyster crab. What happens when a little crab decides to live off an oyster without giving anything in return? Let's find out in tonight's tale. The Selfish Oyster Crabs, beneath the rolling waves of the sea. In a world of shimmering light and swaying seaweed, there lived countless creatures, some gentle, some fierce, and some rather selfish. Among them were the oyster crabs. Now, oyster crabs belong to the crab family, but they are quite different from their busy, hard-working cousins, who scurry about on the sand or dart through rocky pools. Oyster crabs have a single passion in life. They love the taste of oyster juice. More than anything else in the ocean, they crave it. And once they find a way to get it, they never let go. One day, an oyster crab swam lazily through the water, letting the current carry him along. He passed starfish clinging to rocks, schools of glittering fish darting past, and even a jellyfish drifting by like a floating lantern. But the oyster crab paid no attention. He was not interested in hard work or beauty or even adventure. All he wanted was food, and he wanted to get it the easiest way possible. Soon, his little eyes spotted a bed of oysters lying snugly on the ocean floor. The oysters sat quietly, their shells closed tight, filtering the seawater for their meals. They were peaceful creatures, harming no one, asking for nothing. The oyster crab clicked his tiny claws together greedily. "Ah," he thought, "what fine fat oysters! Look at that one so big, so plump, so full of delicious juice. Yes, you look as if you could feed me very well without my lifting a claw. I think I shall crawl inside your shell and make myself at home." And with that selfish thought, he scuttled down and crept between the oyster's shells. The oyster, being a quiet creature, did not resist. Slowly, the oyster crab wedged himself inside, tucking into the soft folds of the oyster's body, and began to feast. "Oh, how delightful!" the oyster crab sighed, sipping the rich juices. "This is far better than searching for food myself. Why should I work when I can let this oyster do it for me? Yes, this will suit me very well indeed." The oyster, however, felt the intrusion keenly. Though it could not speak, it sighed within itself. The crab was taking everything, giving nothing, and making life heavy and difficult. Day after day, the crab stayed inside, eating the oyster's food, resting in the oyster's shelter, never once offering thanks. He grew plumper and more comfortable, while the oyster weakened under his constant sponging. The other sea creatures noticed. A little fish passing by said, "That poor oyster! He carries a selfish guest within." A wise old clam muttered, "It is the way of the oyster crabs. They never do their own work. They only live from the efforts of others." And the seaweed whispered, "How unfair, how selfish, how wrong." But the oyster crab did not care. He laughed to himself and said, "Let them talk. I am clever. I get what I want without effort. That is all that matters." Now, what the oyster crab did not understand was this: selfishness always brings trouble in the end. One day, a fisherman lowered his net and gathered up oysters from the sea floor. Among them was the very oyster that held the greedy crab. The crab felt the oyster lifted high into the air and thrown into a basket. "What's this?" he cried nervously. "Where are we going?" But the oyster remained silent. The basket rattled and rocked until it reached the fisherman's boat. There the fisherman pried open the oyster shell, and lo! Instead of finding only the oyster, he discovered the little crab hiding inside. "Well, well," laughed the fisherman. "What have we here? An oyster crab. Some say you are a delicacy, a treasure hidden in the oyster's heart. And yet, I know you're kind, you are lazy and selfish, taking what you have not earned." The crab squirmed, but it was no use. He had lived off the oyster without gratitude, and now his selfishness had led him into the fisherman's hands. And that was tonight's story, The Selfish Oyster Crabs. The oyster crab thought he was clever, living off another's hard work, but in the end, his selfishness caught up with him. This story reminds us that it's far better to share, to give, and to earn our place in the world, rather than to take without thanks. For the ocean teaches this lesson again and again. Those who take without giving soon find themselves caught in their own greed. As you close your eyes tonight, may you dream of the deep blue sea, where even the smallest creatures teach us lessons of kindness, fairness, and generosity. Please subscribe Fantasy Gleam to get this type of story regularly. Good night, wonderful dreamers. Sleep well, and tomorrow another magical story will be waiting just for you.